Thank you for listening to the Dog Trainers Podcast, a podcast created by dog trainers for dog trainers, or anyone who's ever fallen in love with man's best friend.
Episode 35, Proper Introduction of Training Tools.
One thing that I've learned was that actually certain training collars help develop certain skills. So like, let's say, for example, if I have a client who is very heavy-handed, what I've learned is putting them on a prong collar teaches them better timing and subtleties. If I have a client who's underhanded, if you will, or light-handed, I don't know what the opposite of heavy-handed is, but they're just underwhelming in their corrections. If we put those dogs on, let's say, a choke chain or a slip lead, well, naturally, in order for them to actually see a result, they actually have to increase their timing, their speed, their follow through on the leash. And sometimes in certain situations, I've actually read that in a client and I've put them on a certain tool so that I could develop that skill uh, in them before I put another tool on the dog that they're actually going to be using. So that's an interesting thing.
Yeah, that is actually a very interesting point. And this is where I thought you were going with it. But I like that point too. Where I thought you were going with it is the same can be said from the perspective of the dog. I do notice that some dogs learn some things better with one tool like versus the other.
Mhm.
For example, every e-collar dog that I train, every board and trained dog that's going to do e-collar that we already know from the jump with the owners and everybody, we're all on board. This dog's going to be e-collar trained.
Mhm.
I don't just dive into e-collar work. I start with food because there are some things that food can teach that e-collars, I guess, could teach, but just not to the same degree. And after the food, I move into leash pressure because of the same thing. Then we get into e-collar stuff. But I couldn't agree more that some tools are better for teaching certain things than other tools. And that doesn't mean, because obviously when you present a finished package back to the owner, you don't want to be like, here, use this tool for this, that tool for that.
Right.
But I think you'll find a lot of the times, once the dog is taught, you can then replicate it with the one tool. But in the process of teaching, sometimes it takes 2, 3, 4, and that's exactly where the expertise comes in. But Brent's point is 1000% true and valuable that, you know, if you put a person on a prong and that they feel for themselves just how little pressure you need, they're like, oh, whoops, I need to really dial things back. I couldn't agree more with you. That's an excellent point.
Yep. Awesome, man. So I really like this back and forth between us where we're talking about training collars. And just to kind of recap for the audience, we talked about kind of how do we go about kind of combating some of the common fears and pushbacks that we get in regards to introducing training collars on with clients, right? One thing that happens is people empathize too much with their dogs and they put themselves in the dog's shoes and they think about, how would I feel if I put something around my neck? How would I feel if someone jerked my chain? How would I feel? Then what happens is they empathize. And one big point that Mariano made was, dogs and humans are very different species, and we interact and do a lot of things socially very different and physically very different. And I think it's important for us to educate our clients on that, as well as making sure we teach them the other side of the coins of what could develop if this doesn't get done right.
Correct.
The second thing was the fear of hurting or damaging the dog's neck, which is a very real fear. However, one thing that we learn in training is if we're using the right tool, we're actually able to use the least amount of pressure or force, right? If we're using the wrong tool on the dog's neck, then we end up having to use unnecessary correction, unnecessary amounts of repetitions, and unnecessary amounts of force to get our points across. Okay. And then the third point was, um, you know, obviously when we're using aversives or corrective collars, there's always this fear or this guilt or shame that owners feel of feeling that they have to actually inflict pain in their dog
Hmm.
in order to get a reaction. And um, I would say it is our job as dog trainers to really make sure we are putting the proper tool that owner is ready for,
Hmm.
right? Um, and this is where tool diversity really comes into play. If we know how to use different training tools and collars, I think we can sometimes gradually ease our clients in to this idea of not applying pain, but definitely applying control or developing control
Mhm.
over their dogs, being able to grab attention when it's appropriate. Because again, these are the people, these are the common three fears that we see our clients have. And in order for us to be very effective dog trainers, we need to know how to navigate sometimes those muddy waters and emotions that our owners experience.
And just as a quick aside, I would add to that that when we talk about the negative connotation that people have regarding a tool itself or regarding just the idea of hurting their dog or over empathizing with their dog and all that good stuff, a huge part of this process is teaching owners the process. Because
Mm.
again, so much of that negative connotation with a lot of these tools comes from misuse or straight up abuse of these tools, which is not then the fault of the tool, right?
And also misinformation and lack of
Correct.
experience and lack of yeah, lack of experience. Most people who hate tools are ignorant to those.
100%. To those tools, right? Or they've developed a like an emotional attachment against the tool or whatever the case, which again is fine and everything, but just make sure that you know what you're talking about before you tell somebody something that may or may not be true, right? So uh, that's the big point I wanted to make was when owners are taught the actual training process, tool aside, I agree with you there. Tool aside, dogs learn this way, right? You mark something and you reinforce it. You mark something and you correct it. You reinforce what you want. You kind of take down what you don't want. Dog training can be broken down very simply. Now, mind you, it can be delved into quite deeply, which is what we like doing because we're talking to other dog trainers. But when you're talking to owners, find that way that makes sense for you to break down the training process for their dog in a way that they understand and then explain tools like a little spice on top of that how this helps the process. It's not
Mm.
about the tool, it's about this is what I need to do with your dog, this is why this tool or that tool or whatever the case is going to help us get there. And really pay attention to that kind of thing. I've had a ton of success with explaining tools and things to people when I kind of took that spin on it. One of my big inspirations for that, I think of like Sean O'Shea, who again is kind of different because he only works e-collar, but he's boiled that thing down to a damn science, including talking to owners about it, which is
Right.
totally legit. That's fair. That's fine. But yeah, I mean, explain the training process. How do dogs learn? Tell the owner about that, and then get into whatever the tool.
Right. 100%. 100%. That was such a great outro or a great last point you made, Mariano. I really hope that this episode was helpful for people who might be struggling on an angle or a way to explain something maybe you've never explained them to your clients before. One thing I learned as a dog trainer is I would have a new way of explaining something every 2 or 3 weeks because that was the challenge to myself. And I loved hearing other dog trainers speak about a subject. One of these days, I really hope that we could have like a panel of dog trainers talking about some of the big questions that we get heard of.
Mm-hmm.
And that might be happening here before 2020 is over. But really excited for this episode. We do have a couple other episodes on the similar subject, how we introduce other types of tools that might get a little pushback. For example, crates and confinement, and funny enough, treats. Right, even the
Yeah.
treats we get pushback on. But we'll do save those for another episode. Thank you guys so much for listening to episode 35. If this was helpful, please go ahead and share this episode with a friend, at least just one person. Help us spread the word of the Dog Trainers podcast to people who will find benefit to this. Your rescue organization that you work with, share this podcast with them. Your clients, share this podcast with them. There's definitely some episodes that have been very helpful to my own clients. And hopefully they can add value to your clients as well. Share it with your family members that they don't want to listen to you, even though you're the family dog trainer.
Right.
But maybe they'll listen to us, right? And yeah, just share it with a friend who might have a dog, who we might be able to explain something differently than you, and we might be able to make it click for them. So yeah, just please help us share this. Also, whatever streaming service you guys are on, Spotify, podcast, Google, iTunes, doesn't matter. Leave us a review if it's possible, right? If you guys leave us a review, it helps us show up in so many more searches for Dog Trainers podcast. Now we have a wonderful following so far, but our goal is we really want to get to help as many people as possible. So your guys' reviews will definitely help us get to that goal. And again, just want to thank you guys for listening. This was episode 35, dealing with clients, introducing training collars. So appreciate you guys. Me and Mariano will see you guys on episode 36 next week. And much love to everybody. And we'll see you guys around. Peace.
Peace. Thank you for listening to the Dog Trainers Podcast, a podcast created by dog trainers, for dog trainers, or anyone who's ever fallen in love with man's best friend.
We really hope you guys enjoyed this episode, and we hope to see you back for the next one. But in the meantime, please follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Dog Trainers Podcast. Go ahead and leave a comment. Ask us any questions that you want. We would love to connect with our dog trainer communities all around the world. Take care, guys. We'll see you next time.